This hour on I-24 News, a gunman opened fire inside a high school in South Florida. Authorities say at least 17 people were killed and more than a dozen others were injured.
It's horrible. It's catastrophic.
Gunman in maroon tried to flee by blending in with fellow students. He was identified and arrested.
He was a former student of Douglas High School. He got expelled for disciplinary reasons. I don't know the specifics.
Distraught witnesses described loud bangs, screams, and absolute terror.
I heard 5 pops, and I was like, that's not a drill.
After I heard those shots, I just ran, and I was off the property in a matter of 2 minutes.
We will bring you the latest. Plus, a week after a White House staffer resigned over spousal abuse, President Trump has finally spoken out unequivocally. Still, congressional Republicans, infuriated over the White House handling of Rob Porter, are lashing out. And around the world, reaction is pouring in to the police-recommended indictment of Israel's prime minister, but Benjamin Netanyahu says his government coalition remains stable. And in Syria, at least 400 Islamic State militants just surrendered to U.S.-backed rebel forces. Meanwhile, aid trucks have finally arrived in an area that Syrian regime forces have bombed repeatedly.
From the I-24 News Studios in Times Square in New York, this is Stateside with David Schuster.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. The United States just had its 18th school shooting since the start of the year. Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel is briefing reporters with the latest. Let's listen.
Aberrant behavior. We need to report it to local authorities. Since we've last briefed, we've identified 12 victims within this school. We will not be releasing the names of any victims until every family and every parent is notified accordingly. As soon as that's been done, of course, we will release a list. I want to thank you for getting the information to the folks we need. I'm going to bring up Mr. Runcie. Mr. Runcie is going to speak a little bit about some of the issues that the school board is incurring as superintendent, some of the decisions he's made. And then you'll hear from Governor Scott. We'll take any questions, and then we'll probably give you your next briefing tomorrow. Thank you. Mr. Runcie.
This evening, our district is in a tremendous state of grief, sorrow. We're heartbroken over this unspeakable tragedy that has occurred here in Parkland, Florida. Words cannot express the sorrow that we feel. The victims and their families, our thoughts and prayers go out to them. No parent should ever have to send their kids to school and have them not return. That should not happen in Parkland. It shouldn't happen anywhere in this country. And we've got to find a way for this to stop. As a district, we will continue to work with law enforcement. We are focusing on providing all of the support that our students, our families, and employees need to cope with this devastating tragedy. It's going to take us some time to go through this, to heal, to figure out how to move on. Some updates on Marjory Stoneman Douglas. As for activities in school, will be closed for the remainder of this week. All activities will be canceled as well. We are going to provide grief counselors. They will be available to Marjory Stoneman Douglas students and families at the Pines Trails Park Recreation Center and Amphitheater, located at 10555 Trails End, Parkland, Florida, beginning at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Again, that's grief counselors for parents and families at Pines Trails Park Recreation Center in Parkland. We will also have grief counselors available for staff members at the Parkland Library at 6620 North University Drive in Parkland. Again, for the staff members, we will have grief counselors available at the Parkland Library at 6620 North University. The brief counselors will also be available at West Glades Middle School, which is right adjacent to this high school as well. And what I can tell you about today's shooter was a former Marjory Stoneman Douglas student and was currently enrolled in Broward County Public Schools. Because of federal laws around FERPA and student privacy, I can't provide you any additional information about the student this time. Again, we are tremendously heartbroken, saddened. Our prayers, thoughts go out to the Marjory Stoneman Douglas family and the victims. We're going to pull through this together as a community. This has been a day we've seen the worst in humanity. Tomorrow is going to bring out the best in humanity as we come together to move forward from this unspeakable tragedy. And I would like to thank Sheriff Israel and all the law enforcement agencies. It's been unbelievable. The courage, the support. Almost every municipality in Broward County has been here. They've been coordinated. They've been working nonstop. The governor, his office, the state, everyone has just been outstanding in terms of their support and their efforts, and it's been heartwarming to see that. So as a community, as a state, I'm sure we'll be able to recover from this. Governor Scott, thank you.
So as soon as you hear something like this is happening, the first thing you start thinking about the families. You know, you think about your own family. As a grandparent and a parent, the first thing you think about is, you know, God, I hope this never happens to my family. Then you think about, you're furious. How could this ever happen in this country? How could this happen in this state? This is a state that is focused on keeping all of our children safe. You come to the conclusion this is just absolutely pure evil. This state does not tolerate violence. We have law enforcement that will always show up to defend our safety. As soon as this happened, I started having updates from Sheriff Israel. I've talked to President Trump, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristen Nielsen, Superintendent Runcie, the Commissioner of Law Enforcement, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Rick Swearingen. And I know everybody has worked tirelessly to make sure we do everything to keep everybody safe and to have a thorough investigation. My prayers are with everybody impacted. I can't imagine what the families that are sitting there wondering if they've lost a family member. They don't know yet. Those that do know they've lost a family member, I just can't imagine how their lives have been changed. Like all of us, we'll be praying for each of those. Everybody in the hospital, I pray for their full recovery. All the individuals that unfortunately had to go through this experience, I know that there's going to be grief counselors, and I'm sure it's going to be very, very difficult as they think through what happened and replay in their mind what happened. I just can't imagine going through that. After this press conference, I'm going to be going to the hospital to do everything I can with those families. I'm going to continue to let local law enforcement, the school district, everybody involved know whatever state resources are necessary. We will provide whatever resources are needed to do everything we can, either whether it's the investigation or help any family member that's impacted. Again, this is just pure evil. But I will be staying here in Broward County to do everything I can to be helpful.
Basically, minutes after this event happened, I got a call from our Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Hours later, she's here. She, sadly, when I was speaking to her privately, she knows all too well about these tragedies. She was in Orlando in the aftermath of the Pulse nightclub, and she's come down here to help the families of those that lost loved ones. So I'm going to bring her up here to talk to you about some of the things that the Attorney General is going to do for our families.
Thank you, Sheriff. Sheriff, I cannot thank you, the governor, and the FBI. Rob, how you've handled this. You've been incredible. Superintendent, FDLE, all of the agencies working together. It's a horrible tragedy, and sadly, we've been through this before. I was also out in Nevada for the mass shooting. In fact, one of the victims called me on the way here from the Nevada shooting and said, I can't believe this is happening again. She still has PTSD, and she was a survivor. The office, my office functions in a way, and this is what we're going to be doing. I have 5 advocates headed in right now. I will have at least 10 more tomorrow, driving in from all over the state. We will pay for the funeral expenses of these poor victims and do everything we can to help their families. The state of Florida, we will pay for counseling for the surviving victims. We will pay for students who need counseling. We will have the forms. It's paperwork that just must have a page that must be filled out. We bring it to the victims' families so they can get it done right now. Don't have to worry about the expenses. We will take care of it. GoFundMe reached out to me already tonight. They've been pulling off anyone. If you think you're going to scam people during this tragedy, you're not. GoFundMe, they're monitoring every site that's popping up, and no money will be dispersed under GoFundMe until they know it's legitimate. So if you are donating to a crowdfunding site, GoFundMe is making sure that those funds will go to true victims and their families. We've also reached out to the funeral homes, the directors in Florida, who have been great partners through Pulse. We will not let funeral homes gouge us. The funeral home industry, they're sending down people tomorrow to help with the cost of the burial expenses for these victims. Sadly, we've all become a club that we never wanted to be a part of. Partnering with the FBI, and now this is our 3rd time dealing with such a mass tragedy.
And that was Florida State Attorney General, Florida State Attorney General Pam Bondi, saying that the state will pay funeral expenses and try to make this as easy as possible on the victims' families. Governor Rick Scott, who was over her left shoulder, spoke before and said that this is pure evil. And then there is the sheriff of Broward County, who said at the top that the death toll remains at 17. 17 people were killed. One student on this day on her phone captured the actual violence in her classroom. We want to show it to you, but we warn you that this is graphic and you may find it disturbing. That's just a clip of the video that the student took. The alleged gunman in the maroon shirt was taken into custody alive. Police say that he tried to blend in with fleeing students before he was identified and arrested. Police have named him as 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, a former student. Police say that the alleged gunman used an AR-15 rifle, similar to what is standard issue for U.S. combat troops. A dozen people were reportedly killed inside the school. 3 more died outside the building, and 2 others died at area hospitals. Witnesses in the hallways and classrooms described hearing loud bangs, screams, and people literally begging for their lives.
As soon as the fire alarm got pulled, and kids were evacuating, I heard 5 pops. And I was like, that's not a drill. I was like, and we never did a drill like that. And when we started evacuating towards the back of Westglades, towards the middle school, I knew that it was more than a drill because we've never done that.
You hear about this all the time, but you never expect it to happen right here in your neighborhood. Everybody knows around here is a safe place, and we don't expect this to happen here, but then when that happens, you're just taken aback.
All of a sudden, I hear a sound that sort of sounds like a garbage truck, like banging. So at first I figured maybe it was just back with the janitors or whatever, and then all of a sudden I hear boom, 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 and it's just stops, and I hear screaming everywhere, and we ducked underneath my teacher's desk.
Those are just some of the witness statements. We want to bring in I-24 News correspondent Marcus White, who joins us now. Marcus, you've been tracking information about the alleged shooter. What else are we learning about him?
Well, one of the most bizarre things is the fact that after the shooting, he was placed in handcuffs and then taken to a police cruiser, but then he was taken to the hospital, the same hospital where many of the victims of the shooting were taken. He did not appear to be injured after the shooting, so it was kind of puzzling to learn that he was then taken to the hospital. In addition to that, there's a math teacher who says that last year, Cruz tried to get onto the the high school campus with a backpack. He was unsuccessful, but on this day, they had no idea that there was any kind of threat. However, there were some students that did describe a very bizarre and troubled individual, one who liked to post pictures of weapons on his social media accounts. In fact, one student said that everyone predicted this. That's what he told a news reporter down in Florida. And there's another student that just said that they were not surprised by anything that happened involving Cruz today.
Marcus White reporting with the latest on Nicholas Cruz, the alleged gunman. Marcus, thank you. Joining us now is Andre Pierre, former mayor of North Miami. Andre has been in constant contact with authorities in Broward County. And Andre, the death toll still stands at 17, but what are you picking up in terms of any possible warnings that police or authorities in the Broward County educational system may have had?
Well, thank you again for having me on the show. Basically, what we have gathering thus far, and you heard from the superintendent of school who's been there, who came from a different place. He took over Broward County Public Schools, and he brought the school level to a different standard. Basically, what authorities are saying is that they cannot believe something like this can actually happen in a place that it happened. And as most of you already heard and probably already know, you can see that school, basically, that's the production of a lot of students are going to Ivy League schools. They excel well, they do well. So if something like this can happen in Parkland, I mean, can you imagine some of the other less fortunate schools that we have around South Florida and also in the state of Florida? So basically, I mean, FBI is on the ground, CIA is on the ground. We have, you know, Sheriff Scott Israel that you know well. He is a tough guy when it comes to crime. He doesn't, I mean, you're not going to bully him. You know, he's going to get down to it and get these issues resolved. So basically, everyone around that I have spoken to, you know, the local police departments, the chiefs, basically, they all are saying that this is just terrible. We heard from the governor. I mean, this is pure evil. This is something that we have not seen anything like this in the state of Florida. Something, you know, that happened in Orlando, but you know, this is in a school with children. Especially in a school like this, you know, we've never seen stuff like that.
Andre Pierre, former mayor of North Miami. And Mayor Pierre, we thank you for coming on. And again, this is the worst school shooting in Florida history, although not the worst mass shooting. That was the Pulse nightclub a few years ago in Orlando. President Trump has tweeted his condolences to the victims of Parkland, Florida. Shortly after the news broke, just before 4 o'clock this afternoon, Mr. Trump tweeted, "My prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school." Let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv. And Dan, what has struck you about the reaction on this day from Washington?
Well, it is the usual. There are Democrats, including Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who made an emotional appeal on the floor of the Senate for Congress this time to do something, unlike what happened at the elementary school shooting in his state, Connecticut, 5 years ago after 20 little kids and 6 adults were murdered at the school. Nothing was done, and Murphy says that Congress is responsible. A few moments ago at that news conference that we were airing, the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, he was asked, in effect, about the gun control issue, and he said there is a time to have that conversation about how to make our communities safer. And then a reporter said, what's a 19-year-old doing with an assault weapon, an AR-15? And the governor says, oh, that will be fully investigated, and then we'll determine the future how to make our communities safer. The Sheriff Scott Israel then stepped forward and said, you know, more money has to be devoted to mental health. When there's mental illness, there's not enough attention paid to that. It's just showing you that in general, in Florida, there is not a big call for more gun control, and Governor Scott had an A rating. Perfect from the National Rifle Association. David.
Dan Raviv, senior Washington correspondent. Dan, thank you very much. We're going to have a little bit more on the prospects for gun control ahead with Michael Schur, and also a look at how police tactics have changed over the years involving schools.